This episode of the podcast is brought to you by our friends at Regrow.
Hey, cannabis operators, got a couple questions for you. Are your SOPs tied directly to your cultivation plans? Can you easily manage your inventory and workforce and vendors from a single system? Can you manage compliance across multiple licenses and states? Do you have performance analytics to help you maximize your 24-month cultivation and manufacturing plans? If this is not the case, Regrow is there to help. They can help you maximize your yields and consistency. Think of Regrow as the single pane of glass view into your entire supply chain. They're available globally with native localization and foreign language support. So if you're a cannabis company searching for a strategic business partner to help you automate your business, scale effectively, and make the supply chain work for you, you can find Regrow at regrow.io. That's regrow.io. Regrow, the premier cloud-based cannabis supply chain management system. Cameron Stone, how are you?
Doing very well, thanks. How about yourself?
I am doing very well as well. Thank you for asking. I was looking back. I think this is episode 250 maybe, but Regrow was one of the first when I first started the podcast with your CEO, Rob Woodburn. And so welcome back, Regrow. Happy to have you here.
Yeah, we definitely appreciate it. Rob warmed me up a little bit, and I did used to listen to you. I haven't listened in a long time just because I've been so busy, but it was back in like February when I really started get going at Regrow. I looked for all the podcasts around cannabis, and I'd already been listening to like Dude Grows and a couple others, but found you and found more kind of business insight from your podcast, and that's what I was appreciative of. And then oh man, summertime came around and I don't have time to listen to anything anymore. It's just been so crazy.
Life comes quick, man. I totally get it. Well, I appreciate you listening for the time when you could, and excited to have you on, and want to talk all about, Regrow and some of the challenges that y'all are solving within the ever-changing cannabis industry, right? But before we do that, Cam, let's first start with you. I mean, tell me a little bit about your background. Why are you passionate about the plant? And we'll kind of go from there.
Okay. I have quite a bit of background in cannabis. First really started growing in 95 with street lamps, high pressure sodium street lamps that we were finding on the side of the road. That was in California. Really the first foray into growing. I knew growers at the time.
Was that a thing? Was that I'm not familiar with that.
Oh yeah, man. Yeah. That was the easiest way to get good lighting was finding street lamps that were knocked over.
Wow. Okay. Cool. Nice.
Yeah. It's old school stuff. And we were growing in closets. Didn't really know what we were doing, but didn't want to pay the high prices and didn't want the Mexican weed that was crushed in a trash compactor.
Brick weed.
Yeah. So that was kind of the first experience. I always knew growers at that time and was able to get good product back, and this was when it was pretty rough and illegal, very illegal. I ended up in Colorado in 97 roughly, and found more growers, but everything was very indoor here. It was vastly different. And started really picking up on how people were scaling indoor grows. And so all the way through 2000, had friends who had big houses with lots of lights all over the place. And, we were still relatively kind of underground at the time, or it definitely was, until Red Cards came out in, I think it was 2008 in Colorado. And my neighbor said, "Hey, I want you to be my caregiver." He knew I was growing, and I was like, "Well, do I want to get on the list?" And we did it. I had to cut my grow back to like 12 plants at the time, and was growing really personally for me and him, because I was always in IT doing, I always had an IT job.
Was Red Cards, was that like a medical card to get?
Yeah, that was our medical cards here in Colorado.
Gotcha. Okay.
I still have a copy of it somewhere. It's been so long. It's like 13, 14 years. Yeah.
Wow, that's awesome that you saved it though.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I was scared to death. I had it taped on the door, and thought, oh, somebody's going to come in and here's my proof, like, cause I was on the list and I was worried, as everyone was at the time. Those were like the Bush days, basically. And really from there, everything just blew up. After medical started becoming more relevant, I had a number of friends who opened dispensaries for the medical side. I was consulting them on how to set up and scale their grows. I had taught my neighbor, that same caregiver, his name was Bill Mays, how to make tinctures. And they started an entire business called Tincture Bell out of it. And then Hershey's sued them out of business completely because they were like, they were using like Dabba Zabba instead of Abba Zabba. They were kind of using brand names from Hershey's and
I see.
altering it,
Yeah.
and so somewhat of a claim to fame. If you Google Tincture Bell, it's pretty hilarious reading all the stories and everything.
I love the name. It's really catchy, especially if their whole product line is based off tinctures.
It absolutely was. And I always thought Disney was going to get them first, but Hershey's came and wiped them out. Yeah, that's when really I kind of got to this decision point, because I was running some businesses, some cable television businesses here. And I was looking at, man, do I go down this dispensary path, or I have opportunities to go into Silicon Valley and really, take that route.
The corporate route, the IT corporate route.
Yeah. And I was just a little sketched by what was going on in the cannabis world at the time and thought IT would be better. And did that, ended up back in San Diego. And really that's where we got the foundation of what the Regrow platform is built on. So in 2010, I started working for a platform that handled a lot of different operational processes. And we grew it up to a big, very large company. And when we had the chance to come back and put cannabis on top of it, I jumped at the opportunity. And that's really where we're at today.
That's wow. So in a way, I mean, that seems like probably the best decision that you could have made at the time, right? Because you had already kind of been in the medical cannabis space as a cultivator, right? And as a patient, because you had the card yourself also to grow, correct, right? So then after that, you decided to kind of go into a mature industry, right? Which there you kind of learned best practices that you could apply then to what is now the burgeoning industry of cannabis.
Yeah. And I do. It's funny you say best practices, because I really dislike that phrase. I like to leverage experience.
Why do you hate best practices?
Well, it's you can't stuff growers into a box, or really any process into a box of like, hey, this is the best way to do something. There's lots of good ways to do something.
That's true.
Conditions and environments can change. So we always use the term leveraged experience, because the more I learn, the more I'm able to apply to your situation based on everything that I've learned in the past, right? And so there's no true best practice, maybe a finite version of it based on all these conditions, but I like to just say we've got good leveraged experience that we can help you understand, how to better improve upon your garden or your processes.
So would you say then, would best practices apply in indoor cultivation?
It can, but I mean, how do the best practices on a drip cocoa apply to a drip rock wall? Maybe not. pH is different. So it's kind of like
strains are different, right? Yeah, you're making a good point. So there's too many variables in this space for there to be a set standard of best practices or ways in which to execute things, because you can. And part of it maybe too is that we're still so early in on this, right? We're learning different techniques and ways of doing things, and nothing is kind of settled yet. Is that true?
That I definitely agree with that. And I one thing I love is where technology is driving this, right? Because your tomato and cucumber growers were never able to put R&D money like we can behind these operations, right? So we're starting to see crazy things start to come out. I mean, just the LED technology is fascinating. I've been watching it for years. But to try to say everybody should grow this way, Or, you know, if you're a major retailer that is subleasing your genetics out across the country, are you going to try to stuff them into your way of growing, or are you going to let them grow the best potential cannabis that they can based on how they know to do it, and then just rebrand it as, you know, as that retailer?
Right.
So
You've sold me. Okay, it's no longer best practices. We're gonna call it leveraged experiences. I like it. I'm going with it. So tell me, like, you know, being in Silicon Valley and doing that, and then when did the light bulb moment happen with Regrow? Like, when did you know, like, okay, we can take these learnings and apply them here?
it's kind of funny. I've chased a lot of startups, right? So I've and I'm not talking little startups. I'm talking pretty decent sized ones. And I kept trying to get, like, I wanted to get early on. I was getting in at like your Series C and D rounds, and I wanted some of those like early Series A or like founder level, you know, shares in the IT space. And so I had finally got hooked up with this company here in Boulder that does AI, you know, just about, I don't know, a year and a half ago. And I got a bunch of Series A stock, and it was groundbreaking, you know. And I was so excited about just those aspects that after I took the job, I was like, I hate this job.
Yeah.
um,
You like hit that peak of like what, and then it was just all like what you didn't expect it to be, right?
yeah. I was too much thinking about, like, you know, culture and growing the business, and I realized I don't like the product, you know, in general. Like, I don't want to sell plain old boring sales analytics to people, you know, that are based on AI, but it's like we're talking such small margins of finding, you know, needles in haystacks, and it was just so boring to me. You know, it
Right.
wasn't sexy at all.
Sure. I don't
I
blame
thought
you.
AI would be, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's hilarious. So how long did you until you had that realization? Like, how long were you in the role for?
About 6 8 months, and I just caught myself. My wife's like, "You're not happy." I'm like, "Yeah, I know I'm not happy." And then finally, like, I had been keeping up with Rob. Rob and I worked together all the way back to 2010, basically. And I was always watching.
In cannabis or in
No,
the
no, at the platform, one of the first startups that I worked
got
at.
you. Okay.
Um, and I was always kind of seeing their stuff on LinkedIn and just like, hey, what are you guys up to? We touch base. And then finally, you know, it was literally the new year, this year came by, and I'm like, I'm out. I don't want to do this anymore. I kind of looked back at myself through the whole year and said, I got to do something different, you know?
Yeah. Good for you.
And I reached out to Rob, and he's like, what's it going to take, man? And I'm like, here's what I can do. And I was on board, like, just like.
Wow. Wow. It's good to have a good strong network, you know. And especially like just the serendipitous moment of being able to enter back into the cannabis industry is kind of where you started before, you know, at the beginning of this podcast, kind of sharing those experiences. So has it felt like it's been full circle?
Pretty much. Yeah, I would say so. All the business experience I'd learned along the way is definitely helping me, you know, in pushing our product, in developing our product, and then selling our product ultimately, because the we're seeing people come from the manufacturing industry in general into the cannabis space now, and they know what they want. Whereas, you know, if you looked back 2 to 3 years ago, people had no idea what they were doing, really. They're just trying to scale, and everybody's using Google Sheets and just all the, you know, and data's everywhere, and there's nobody making any critical strategic or tactical decisions. They're just reactive 100%. And so now that we're starting to see, you know, people come from other industries outside of cannabis into the production line and manufacturing lines, and cultivate and applying it to cultivation, I'm able to speak that same language with these guys now, you know, and kind of help push our product along. And it's a product that they're, you know, used to seeing in those spaces where margins are much tighter.
In that example that you just gave, where it's like there's more of a like-mindedness now, I guess is the way I'll put it. It sounds like, are those new entrants coming from IT industries that kind of speak the language and are applying it, or is it like industry operators in cannabis that you worked with 2 years ago that have now just gain that knowledge and are just more organized and with it when it comes to data?
It's a little bit of both. I think the people who are doing it right have reached out and said, I need somebody who understands GMP. I mean, I was just talking with somebody yesterday, and they came from like the injection molded plastics business, right? But they understood what the run rate was and what work in progress meant and how to look at the right numbers on the floor to see if you're being efficient or not, or if people are screwing off, or and how to make better decisions with data. It's very data driven now. And so the winners are kind of pulling those people in or understanding it themselves. And a lot of it does have to do after harvest. It's all of the vertically integrated guys who are doing extracts and stuff, because that's much more fast paced, requires machinery, and it's not nearly as kind of touchy feely as growing is, right? There's conditions that have to happen, and if you don't hit them, you get production stoppage on the floor. And I think that's really where we're seeing those other industries come over and start to benefit, and tell you, hey, these are the things I need to see in order to make your business efficient and always on time.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's talk about some of those, instances where data can really help these operators either optimize their yields or, just streamline their overall business operations. Like, what are some of the core components of Regrow to help these operators do that?
So the biggest things that we have worked on and developed on this platform is really a cultivation module and then a good inventory module. The platform itself has all kinds of things like skills management and SOP management, and it's a task system with workflows. But we had built out very specifically the ability to templatize a grow or a manufacturing plan with all of the tasks and stages that need to happen so that you can repeat it over and over. And it also allows you to assign a skill, and basically at a task level, you can say, this is a cloning task and my people need to have a cloning level 2 skill. And here's the SOP that's associated with this task. So if you have a bunch of turnover, you've got contractors and they pull up their phone to get that job that they're supposed to do, everything is right there in front of them, and they just basically say go. Or if you're using like a workflow automation tool like Priva, where they scan an RFID tag, and that means I'm starting my work, and then when they get to the end, they scan it and say I'm done. We're collecting all that data to understand what the run rate is, how efficient are individual people, and then what's the labor rate of that task that they just did, which we can push into an accounting software and start to understand the true cost of goods sold. So that's really one of the biggest things we worked on. And then inventory management is we see people struggle with it, and lead times are getting tough. And honestly, there's nothing we can do about lead times because supply chain is just kind of a mess. People are buying as much as they possibly can right now. But our inventory tool allows you, to set up standards on the inventory master items about, when you want it to reorder, what kind of rule you want. Do you want just in time? Do you want to keep buffer stocks? So it allows warehouse managers and cultivation managers the ability to know what's going on, which in a Google sheet, you really, you're just going to spend every night looking at it, making sure that you've got what you need. And we take that headache away and say, here's a report. An automatic order is generated for you to go buy more Rockwell blocks. And if that Rockwell supplier has an API, we'll just make the whole thing happen. All you have to do is approve it,
Wow. So there's a lot to unpack there. The first that I heard, which I think is very important, especially it's relevant in my life because I recently started a new job, and the onboarding process has been fantastic at this new company. And there's been jobs in the past where, you've come on and you don't even know the org. You don't have org charts. You don't have, SOPs, policies, how-to guides, like all that kind of stuff, which is so important to kind of set you up for success in the role. So when you talk about, that frequent turnover and how, contractors are coming in, it is important, like you said, for them to just pull up the SOP, understand the job at hand, and be able to successfully do that, um, The next thing that you talked about was like, I guess, the back end, and cost savings, it sounded like. So the data that you're seeing on the back end can inform better business decisions in terms of cost saving moves to make. Is that right?
Yeah. So, and there's lots of it. Is my personnel not trained efficiently? And, my nighttime staff is doing half the work that my daytime staff is doing for the same exact job. Do I know what all of my rates are, for said jobs and skills? Even though I'm paying a guy, say, $15 an hour, maybe I can start to articulate what I think the cost of a job is, and then really figure out how much money am I getting out of each employee, or how much work am I getting out of there. And we can break those down into, per batch or per lot, or you could just have it as a more general term, like a time frame, a monthly time frame or a weekly time frame. But either way, we've got the data points, and then it's just how do you want to apply them to look at them to understand what's going on within your operation.
Got you. No, thank you for expanding on that. And then the last thing I heard was the inventory, kind of value add, and that's basically automated, right? I mean, kind of removing the Excel spreadsheet, looking through your inventory, what's needed, what's not. I mean, there's this kind of this trigger, it sounds like, where y'all will order knowing what products or what items are low or what are needed. And then, like you said, if those are out of stock, then you find other ways to do it, and it's just an approval process. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah, and we have full blown workflow. We're a low code, no code system. So workflows can, if you say that any gardener can basically put in an order for razor blades or scissors or trimmers, and that you just want that PO to automatically go and your order manager to get it and then process that order, we can do that. Versus, hey, if when you need to have something that's going to cost $10,000, like you've got a huge Rockwell delivery, you need to fill your warehouse, we can have multiple approvals throughout that process and notifications and decisions based on things. And it's all really, we just come in and say, how are you doing business, and understand that, and then apply it into our tools so that we're not forcing you into our box. We're doing exactly how you want to do it based on the rules that you've set in place. And oh, by the way, those policies can also be managed in our SOP system. So you've got your policies and your SOPs and really all of your business documents that have a feedback mechanism to them. So if something's wrong in an SOP, somebody could flag it, and then the person who manages that has to take action on it. There's a task that says, your staff says it isn't right, figure it out and update it, right? So nothing ever really gets dropped in our system.
Yeah, I mean, that's that workflow kind of component that you mentioned, where you can add tasks, assign those tasks to certain employees or individuals. That's it's very comprehensive, right? And it, cannabis has its challenges, of course, and it being state level adopted, there are different state regulations, right? So how does Regrow's software integrate with some of these state mandated seed to sell platforms?
So we really like Metric. We've been working with BioTrack recently. It's a much tougher platform to work with, but it does have an API. And we're starting to get into some of those. We're talking with clients that have struggles with that particular platform, and that one's mandated in quite a few states. Metric, people say that it's got its challenges, but it's really a pretty decent API. There's some things that you can't do. When you're working with manifests, you've still got to log into Metric, and nobody's really able to automate those things yet. Although we hear that Metric's working on exposing some of those things. And then things like tags, right? You got to order tags through them. You can't really automate the tag generation, but nearly everything else on plant moves and waste and trim and packages and sending up all of your items, all that stuff we handle through really like a queuing system from our side. So we have a system of record of everything that you're doing, all of your plants, with our own plant numbers and a metric tag. And then as you are doing things, moving your plants around, trimming them, taking waste, kill off, whatever, that is being put into essentially like a buffer where in case metric is down, you can continue working, and we're keeping track of everything. And if metric comes back up, we just first in, first out everything that, as we stored it, to always keep things in sync. And so each state has its own challenges. In Ohio, you've got to do a product ID with it. And in Nevada, when the plant's 8 inches tall, it needs a metric tag, versus California, no metric tag until it's in flower. And, but we don't write code per se. So we're able to easily kind of just, say, oh, we need this field, you need a product ID. So we're going to add that to the payload. And this is an Ohio system. So we can handle in our one system any state's regulatory requirements, basically. And as they change them, we can adapt relatively quickly because we don't have to write code. We just are saying, here's a new field, put the data in there, we'll make sure it gets up to metric.
Wow. So it's almost like you're incorporating this ever-evolving regulatory framework state by state in real time with your software, but you're not coding, you're just adding these fields, getting the information, the input data needed to then carry out the action.
Correct. Yeah. Because it's very workflow driven and data driven. And for us to add a field to a table and then add that into a workflow to push off, it is very, very relatively trivial on the platform that we run on. One of the things I didn't really cover, I spent 2.5 years doing governance, risk, and compliance for all kinds of companies on this same platform, for gold mines, right? And how they had to be compliant with all these different regulatory bodies down in Mexico and South America, Johnson and Johnson, and all of the pharmaceutical side, and there's so many different regulatory things, including just HIPAA, and medical information and all these things. And so I've got a huge background in making compliance easy. And it's really this kind of framework where you understand what the requirements for all of them are, and you have all of those requirements available. And then it's really just a kind of on-off thing where we say, oh, you're here, you don't need this, you don't get that one.
It's an all catch and then remove.
Yeah.
And apply, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. And that seems like a really smart approach in this, again, ever evolving kind of, thing we're facing here in this industry. And that kind of brings me to that question. Is that Regrow's differentiator? I mean, this real-time adaptation to the ever evolving regulatory framework, and what is it? What differentiates y'all?
I think that's one of the differentiators. I really think that, our biggest differentiator is around the fact that we are more of a partner than a software company, right? And so a lot of the software that we've seen out there, they sell it to you and then they hand you the keys, and then you're loading all your own data and trying to figure out how to make it work. And that is not how we operate. We understand your business, all your challenges, help you apply, correct process to them based on that leveraged experience, right? And then stay with you through the life of that with our customer success team to adapt and make changes and provide continual improvements along the way. I think really that's one of our biggest differentiators. And for that reason, we're kind of picky with customer selection. We're not out there to get 50,000 customers, and just say we've got these huge numbers. We want to make sure we pick the right partners, we scale with them, we grow with them, and we understand their business as best as possible.
Yeah. No, it sounds like you really do take that extra mile to establish that really strong partnership, right? Because I mean, you're overseeing a lot of data within their operations, and there's got to be that level of trust and efficiency that takes place. And so, you're really close to all this, obviously, and every day Regrows working to kind of make these operations more efficient. So what advice would you give companies in the cannabis space? Like, how can they be more efficient in their operations?
I think what we're so early on that it's just making data-driven decisions. People are not, even in mergers and acquisitions, we're not seeing the smartest moves sometimes. People are just trying to buy stuff up. I need licenses, and was that a good move? You'll find out soon enough, but people aren't always using data to drive a lot of those decisions. And I think that's really one of the biggest things we're seeing. When we were at MJ BizCon just 3 or 4 weeks ago, there was very few people that were coming to us with that mindset. And the ones that were in that mindset seemed to be ahead of the game already. They were on the right kind of software. They were looking at analytics. They were not nitpicking down in the grow op to try to figure out what to do. They were making bigger macro decisions based on, demand basically. Just 2 years ago, everyone was just grow. We'll figure out what to do with it after you grow it. And now we're starting to hear people say, hey, I'm 8 months ahead of you, and this is what we think we're going to be selling. I want you to start growing this for me now. Get the mother plants going, right? And that's just a complete shift in what we're used to seeing, because usually people are just trying to stuff every room with things they already have. And now we're starting to see, this is the business's plan. This is what you're going to do. And if, a lot of the growers, not in the manufacturing side, but growers, they don't like to be told what to do. I know, I'm one of them, but they like to do things their way. And the business is changing now to say, you're going to do what we say, because we're making data-driven decisions. And so you either got to get with the times if you're a grower, or you got to go do like some heady micro grows, which I think we're going to see a huge explosion of before too long.
Wow, that is so interesting, man. Like that cultural shift that's taking place right before our eyes, right? It sounds like what you're saying is that like there was that influx of just so many people growing so much flower, and then it's like, okay, we've got what we need now. Let's produce what products we need from this major supply. But now, to your point, with technology, software platforms like Regrow, having these data insights, they're saying, no, wait. We know how much yield we need based off of the demand we're getting from our sales, from what we're seeing here or there, whatever it is, right? And then that's informing the grow. And that's where there's that kind of dynamic of, I don't like to be told what to do, because the cultivators have really been leading that charge for so long.
Correct. Yeah. And we haven't seen it, like I said, in manufacturing or processing, because it's just there. It's not that it's not an art form, but growing is much more of an art form, right? At least in a lot of our minds, we all like to think we grow the best stuff because of our processes. We've spent the most time and research on it, and we don't want to tell anybody how we do it,
Yeah.
But
my leveraged experience is better than yours.
exactly. But it's going to turn into just and it's unfortunate in a way. But that's why I relate it back to like microbrews and microgrows, right? You're going to end up with your Budweisers, your Millers that are out there just, that bought everything up and own all the licenses, and they're producing average good green, right? And then you're going to have the people who really loved growing it. They're going to break off, and they're going to have their little, smaller operations. And if we get some indoor consumption laws, you're going to be able to go in and you're going to buy food that has, all different kinds of ganja on it, and you're going to be able to smoke or vape. And I think you're going to see a resurgence of the art at that point, and I'm really looking forward to that, because that's where I want to get into, is to have a little heady, micro grow place where you can see how I grow and try it.
Yeah, I think that would be really awesome too. And I think that is a possibility with the new legislation that's been proposed at the federal level. I think that it would be very difficult for those heady shops and those micro brewery type, grows, like you mentioned, micro grows, to emerge under the CAOA, just because of how high the excise tax was that they were proposing, right? I mean, I think the maximum is like 20% at the federal level. So, or is it 10? Either way, very, very high, because when you add that to the state tax that these operators are already facing, not to mention 280E and all these other hurdles and challenges. The States Reform Act is proposing that 3% excise tax, which
I was shocked when I saw that.
it's insane, right? I mean, I was shocked as well, because you always expect the government, especially the Republican side, to, taxes, and well, they really didn't go after that at all. It seems like there's going to be more opportunity for entrance into the space with that percentage being so low.
Agreed. And we're still going to end up with states that are probably going to impose, interstate taxes when things are coming in. But I think those will eventually kind of work themselves out. But yeah, the 3%, my jaw literally dropped. Just like, that's all they want, where I'm missing something here,
I know.
And I can't really find much wrong with it. I'd love to. I mean, I really don't like any taxes, honestly. And I think that we kind of screwed ourselves in the industry in the beginning of this 10, 15 years ago by just saying, who cares what the tax is? They're going to make it legal for us, and everybody got so happy that we just kind of said, all right, 25%, sure, whatever. Like, and now it's like, well, that's pretty painful. I have a lot of friends who went out of business just purely because of the taxes here in Colorado.
Right. Well, and you talk about a thriving illicit market, right? I mean, like legal cannabis, like Steve D'Angelo said it perfectly on the podcast. He said, you impose such a high tax, there will be no legal industry, because the traditional market will thrive at that point.
Yeah,
the legacy market.
and we still see that here. In Colorado, California, I don't have as much. I mean, I'm in and out of both of these states. I'm a San Diego native, but I really, really like Colorado. And it's just cheaper to live here right now. But I don't keep up with as much of what's going on in California. I'm much closer to what's going on in Colorado here. And there is still very much a gray or black market, however you want to call it. And it's still driving overall price in general that we're seeing here. We don't have nearly the challenges that harvest season does in California, which, I mean, the kind of the floor just dropped out of the market out there right now because there's so much saturation and extra supply. We don't see that nearly as much since we're much more of an indoor and everything's stable. And I think that does also help keep the prices relatively consistent here. But yeah, who knows what's going to happen if we get federal, 3% tax and the ability to move things across state lines. It's going to be, if we get the Banking Act along with that, like it's going to be bigger than the internet. I think.
I totally agree, man. I'm just waiting, it's just the waiting game. And, I would imagine that the States Reform Act will probably get changed, and, certain provisions will be removed or added. But it's really, like you said, it's hard to poke holes at it right now because it looks solid. It looks fucking solid. So we'll see what happens. It's going to be interesting how this plays out.
Absolutely.
Cam, I want to give you the floor before we wrap up, man. What's top of mind? Do you want to leave the audience with anything before we go?
I just probably to reiterate on, if you're a grower out there and you're having a hard time adapting, you're going to have to adapt, or you're going to have to go, smaller scale. If you want to really kind of keep your secrets and stuff, because the industry is going to get just bigger and bigger and bigger. But we need good people out there, keep making sure that we don't end up with tons of pesticides, and, we've got good organic methods. I want the growers to not be so stubborn, basically, because I know a lot of them, and man, some of them are just almost ready to give up in some cases. And then, to the businesses out there, make data-driven decisions. That's really just the biggest key. And we're going to see lots of it. And that's what our our partnership with businesses does. There's lots of other people in this space. We're not, there's room for everybody here. We're so early on. We're not trying to take people down. We want to work with everybody. We want to integrate with everybody. But we want people to make good data-driven decisions and not just do things on a whim. So
great advice. Awesome. Thank you so much for your time, Cameron. Really appreciate it. Enjoy talking with you. Where can people find Regrow's website and social media if they want to learn more?
LinkedIn, we have a really big presence. You can just go to Regrow there, and then it's regrow.io is our actual domain. And you can get in contact with me or anybody else there. LinkedIn's also where best place to find me. I keep a pretty low social profile. I'm old school. I like IRC. I don't know if you even know what that is, but
I don't. What is that?
It's an internet relay chat from like long time ago. Cause I'm like an old school hacker and programmer from the 80s and 90s. So
oh, shit. Nice.
I just stayed away from kind of like, I lurk all over Twitter and everywhere, but I'm not I don't share a lot on those platforms. So
well, you're smart. You're staying out of the noise. There's a lot of it. So
yep, there is.
Awesome. Hey, well, thanks again, Cam. And thank you all for listening. Bye.